The US and Israel have launched an illegal war of aggression against Iran and have already slaughtered countless civilians, destroying whatever remains of the so-called international order. To be clear here, there is no possible legal basis or justification for this unprovoked attack on Iran. These are the facts. It's not hyperbole, it's not spin, it's not rhetoric. It is a fact. Under international law, you cannot launch a war on another nation claiming that otherwise at some point in the future they will pose a threat to you. There is no basis to argue that this is self-defense. This is illegal. Under US law, as per the US Constitution, there's been no congressional approval. What exactly is the pretext? Last year, Donald Trump declared that Israel's nuclear program had been obliterated. What exactly is the strategy? Overthrowing a regime with airstrikes and then replacing it with what? Some functioning alternative? Never happened before. The Israeli Prime Minister claims that the Iranian Supreme Leader Khamenei has been killed by one of these attacks. We'll come on to the implications of that. What we can conclude is that this war is a great crime, one legitimised by other Western leaders. These are the same Western states which facilitated Israel's genocide against the Palestinian people and cheerled the kidnapping of Venezuelan leader Nicolas Maduro. All of this accelerates the world's collapse into violent mayhem. These are the morbid and gruesome symptoms of a declining West. It's also a war of aggression which the Western media are, as ever, justifying and whitewashing, and indeed erasing the actual reality. Let's listen, shall we, to Donald Trump announcing the war today.
A short time ago, the United States military began major combat operations in Iran. Our objective is to defend the American people by eliminating imminent threats from the Iranian regime.
Let's listen to him in 2011.
Our president will start a war with Iran because he has absolutely no ability to negotiate. He's weak and he's ineffective.
Slightly different tune he was singing back then. Let's read some of his tweets. In September 2013, remember what I previously said? Obama will someday attack Iran in order to show how tough he is. A couple of months later, remember that I predicted a long time ago that President Obama will attack Iran because of his inability to negotiate properly, not skilled. In the 2024 presidential election, the Republicans implored voters, vote the pro-peace ticket. Vote Trump Vance. His director of national intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, long campaigned against the war with Iran. In 2019, she posted, Trump's short-sighted foreign policy is bringing us to the brink of war with Iran and allowing Iran to accelerate nuclear program just to please Saudis and Netanyahu. This is not America first. Let's just see how the BBC is framing this war of aggression, shall we? The headline, Iran launches attacks across Middle East after US and Israel strikes on leadership sites. That's their headline. Absolutely fascinating, foregrounding Iran's response rather than the war of aggression, and presenting the US and Israel's war of aggression as being precision attacks on leadership sites, unlike implicitly indiscriminate attacks from Iran. You know, attacks across Middle East. Shall we look at an example of these leadership sites? The Israeli military targeted 2 schools in Iran, killing over 80 children. After killing tens of thousands of Palestinian children, the Israeli military has turned its attention to butchering Iranian kids as well. Let's listen to this from CNN.
We have major breaking news here into CNN. Israel has launched what it calls a preemptive strike on Iran.
If Iran launched an attack on Israel, can you imagine CNN saying, Iran has launched what it calls a preemptive strike on Israel? Bollocks. Let's turn our attention to Western leaders. Let's start with the British Prime Minister, Keir Starmer.
Earlier this morning, the United States and Israel struck targets in Iran. Iran has since launched indiscriminate strikes across the region. I know the British people and communities across our country will be deeply concerned about what this means for security and stability, and for the fate of innocent people across the region, which for so many of us includes friends and family members. So whilst the situation is evolving very quickly, I want to set out our response. The United Kingdom played no role in these strikes, but we have long been clear. The regime in Iran is utterly abhorrent. They have murdered thousands of their own people, brutally crushed dissent, and sought to destabilize the region. Even in the United Kingdom, the Iranian regime poses a direct threat to dissidents and to the Jewish community.
The state of this. Starmer reserves his denunciations for what he calls Iran's indiscriminate attacks, even as dozens of Iranian children are incinerated by Israeli bombs. In the speech, Starmer says that Britain isn't involved in this war. He fails to know which is illegal. But his government has allowed the US military to use British bases for purposes linked to the war in the weeks-long build-up. He says that Iran must never have a nuclear program in the speech he delivers, but this war has far greater aims than that. It doesn't even have that as the aim. I mean, Trump said it was obliterated. It's regime change, which he doesn't refer to at all in the slightest because it's illegal. Now, should we go back to what Starmer, then a human rights lawyer, wrote in The Guardian 23 years ago in the run-up to the Iraq War? He wrote then, challenging the idea that Article 51 of the United Nations Charter allowed for a preemptive strike in the name of self-defence, writing, any threat to the UK or its allies would have to be imminent, and any force used in response to that threat would have to be proportionate before Article 51 can be relied on. The mere fact that Iraq has a capacity to attack at some unspecified time in the future is not enough. Remember Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney during his big speech about the end of American supremacy and the birth of a new international order that had to replace it. What's he saying now? He says Canada supports the United States acting to prevent Iran from obtaining a nuclear weapon and to prevent its regime from further threatening international peace and security. And what of the European Union? The EU High Representative for Foreign Affairs and Security Policy, Kaja Kallas, says that the crimes of the Iranian regime, that's what she wants to focus on. That's the statement she's issued. It's all about the crimes of the Iranian regime. You wouldn't know that Iran's just been illegally attacked by reading her statement. No condemnation of it at all. You see, these people are burning down whatever existed or remained of the international order. And what about the Democratic Party establishment in the United States? They fought to stop a war powers resolution going to a vote because it would mean putting on record their stance on this war. We should remember that in the 2024 presidential election, Kamala Harris engaged in her own warmongering over Iran and even suggested that Trump wouldn't be assertive enough in protecting Israel from Iran. So what was going on here? The so-called negotiations between the US and Iran were a joke. They were not negotiations. They were a pathetic box-ticking exercise before launching a war that was always going to happen. Let's listen to this from the Iranian foreign minister.
I don't know why the US administration insists to start a negotiation and then in the middle of negotiation attack the other party. Today happened exactly what last June happened. We were in the middle of negotiations. And, and it was interesting that this time we made a big progress. 2 days ago, on Thursday, we had a very good meeting in Geneva, together with Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner. And we were able to address serious questions related to Iran's nuclear program.
According to the foreign minister of Oman, just before the war was launched, peace was within reach after Iran agreed not to stockpile any nuclear material. The war wasn't launched because Iran was refusing to comply. It was launched for the opposite reason. Iran has responded by attacking US targets across the Middle East. Obviously, I mean, any state, whoever ruled it, would respond in that way if they were attacked like this. Obviously, that was always going to happen. That's why you end up with an escalation. This is reportedly one such attack in Bahrain. Which is why this line of questioning from the media is so insane. Listen to this here, the US media interviewing the Iranian foreign minister.
So for clarity, you said that your missiles cannot reach the United States by design, that you do not want to reach the United States, but you also said it would be necessary as a defensive vehicle that you could if necessary. So to be clear, are you committing that Iran is not and will not build missiles that would have the capability to reach the United States?
I can confirm, yes.
Sir, if that's a red line for you, why is attacking U.S. military bases abroad justified?
But because they are attacking us. They are U.S. military, installations, facilities, bases who are attacking us. We are under attack. Why don't you, recognize this fact? We are under the attack by U.S. forces in the region. So we have every right to defend ourselves. And how to defend ourselves? We attacked, the U.S. bases. This is obvious. This is a very simple fact. And I hope that, and I'm sure that people would understand that. We are not the one who attacked Americans. We are only defending ourselves.
Now, Iran is closing the Strait of Hormuz, where 20% of the world's oil passes through, and they may well mine that strait, which would have disastrous, catastrophic economic consequences across the world. Oil and gas tankers are reportedly leaving the strait to find refuge in ports in the UAE and Qatar. Now, as I'm speaking to you, reports have emerged that Iran's Supreme Leader Khomeini has been found killed in the rubble of his compound. As Reuters have reported, in the run-up to the US and Israeli attacks on Saturday, the US Central Intelligence Agency assessed that even if Iran's Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei was killed in the operation, he would likely be replaced by hardline figures from the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, two sources briefed on the intelligence said. The assessments, which were produced over the past 2 weeks, looks broadly at what could occur in Iran following a US intervention and the extent to which a military operation could trigger regime change in the Islamic Republic, now a pronounced objective for Washington. What happens next? Well, we can only go by precedent, can't we? Look at what happened to Iraq, to Libya and to Afghanistan. And it must be said, this is completely different. This country is much bigger, has a much bigger population than any of those countries had at the time. It's a country which has huge complexities in terms of, its diversity, its internal divisions. The regime, no question, has massive opposition against it, but it also has a much bigger base of support than the likes of Saddam Hussein had in 2003 or Colonel Gaddafi had in 2011. It has much greater military capabilities than the Taliban did, even though obviously through guerrilla war they defeated the US, or Gaddafi or Saddam Hussein had in 2003. But what do people think is going to happen here? What's the likely outcomes? There'll be peace and harmony afterwards, after this country is bombed over and over again. The truth is, we're trapped in a bit of a nightmare, aren't we? We're trapped in a nightmare because the flailing, declining superpower, in response to that decline, has a far-right demagogue running it. And he believes the way to sort of reverse American decline is by lashing out in these ways, in these kind of, to show some forms of American strength. But look, I have nothing but contempt for the administrations, of course, of George W. Bush and the likes, who caused ruin across the Middle East. But, Donald Trump is not only more extreme, but obviously far less capable as an administration. And they failed on their own terms catastrophically. They went through periods of triumphalism, but they brought ruin, not just to the Middle East, but to Western power. That is an obvious, inevitable outcome of what will happen over whatever time period. But in the meantime, so many people are going to be killed. As I was talking to you and as you've listened, lots of people almost certainly were killed. And in the coming days and weeks, many more people are going to be killed. Blood and chaos. That is what Western power has been bringing for years. And blood and chaos, I'm afraid, is what we now face, looming as ever, in a Middle East which already has witnessed the great crime of our age, Israel's Western facilitated genocide against the Palestinian people. Please like and subscribe. Help us challenge what will be the dire media coverage of this war at patreon.com/OwenJones84. You make all of this possible, obviously. We'll have lots of coverage about this in the days and weeks ahead. I'll be platforming the experts that you need to hear from. So, yeah, it's going to be, what can you say? It's a nightmare. We're trapped in a nightmare, but we don't need to talk about it soberly. We need to talk about the facts. We need to talk about, the angles that I'm missing. So anyway, leave your comments, press like, subscribe, share the video. I'll see you in a bit.